Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I'm your host as always. And thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners presentation. Today's presentation is ensuring the ultimate visibility within your systems environment. And before I get started with other introductions, let me do a brief introduction of Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners offers best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, IT security, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practices. Our professional services team has well over 5,600 professional services engagement, both on-site and remote, and that has been particularly important during the pandemic times we've lived through. And our company has over 1,200, close to 1,300 regular customers all throughout Canada and the United States. I encourage you to reach out to us directly at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278. Or simply visit our website and chat with our IT experts from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. They're there to answer questions for you, whatever that might be, get you demos, provide you the white papers, data sheets, get you set up with remote administration services, or depending on the tool, even services or support. We do offer L1 and L2 support for many products throughout North America. And if that's not your method of communication, you'd rather email us, well, email us at info@flycastpartners.com. Now, today I am joined by an awesome group of folks that are going to be presenting for us today. So I'd like to start out. One of our first presenters is going to be Leon Adaro. He's known as Head Geek at SolarWinds. Leon's got 30 years of network and systems management and monitoring experience that spans financial, healthcare, food, beverage, and other industries, with 20 years focused specifically on monitoring engagement. Welcome, Leon.
Thank you. And for those wondering, yes, that really is my job title. I actually took the job almost sight unseen when they told me that that's what I could have on my business card.
That's awesome. And so let's go into our next presenter is going to be Pete DiStefano, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Pete. It's Principal Product Marketing Manager. Now, Pete is Product Marketing Manager for SolarWinds Application Performance Management and Systems Management products, and his experience includes over 30 years in the tech product marketing and management for companies like IBM, BMC Software, and Symantec. So I'd say he's got one or two things under his belt that he's accomplished. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to the SolarWinds team and let them carry it from here.
Well, first of all, thank you, Rich. I appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, you pronounced my name perfectly. It took me years, and still took me a while to get there. Right. So if you can build this slide out, today's session is around visibility, but I think you'd all agree with me, a whole lot's changed with regards to the world of IT, the world that you're responsible for supporting. Monitoring has never been, I believe, more important than it is today. It's never been more challenging with all of the change. Take an example of your hybrid environment, and I am going to assume that you have a hybrid environment or on your way there. Most companies are. You're dealing with newer technologies combined with your legacy environment. So it's fairly complicated. And although when it comes to really understanding your environment, getting visibility into the health and performance, and troubleshooting when there is an issue, and then of course optimizing your environment and planning for change, that doesn't happen independently one at a time. But we thought all three of those elements of the life cycle of monitoring was critical enough that we break them up into 3 sessions. So we're actually going to be doing 3 webinars. Today's webinar, we are focused specifically on visibility. And my partner in crime, Leon, is going to lead us off and really give you a sense for, like, you think visibility is not that big a deal, but he's going to go into what is visibility and what does that really mean, especially in today's world, and why is that important. So for the time that he speaks, he's really going to talk in the context of why it's important for you as an IT professional and it's product agnostic. I'm the bad guy here when he's done, and I hope what you get from what Leon talks about is some things to think about when you go back to work. I will put a little bit of a lens on it for SolarWinds to kind of talk a little bit how we would, with our solution, satisfy your needs for visibility. And I'll take you through a demo to kind of punctuate that a little bit. But that's kind of the plan today. Again, I hope you find value in what we share, and I hope you have an opportunity potentially to join the other 2 sessions down the road. But instead of me continuing to talk, let me pass it on to Leon and he can get going.
Okay, thank you so much. And you are not at all the bad guy. In fact, you're going to be able to put some of the highfalutin ideas that I have and put them into concrete pictures and examples. So I want to start off. I heard a great comment about 20 years ago from parenting educator Barbara Colaroso, and she had about an hour to help teach parents how to be better parents. And she said, we don't have a lot of time. And while I can try to educate you a little, what I'm really able to do in the time I've got is irritate you. And what she meant was that when an oyster gets a little bit of sand stuck in its shell, it gets irritated. And then it does one of 2 things: either dies or it makes a pearl. Now, I'm hoping I don't irritate you to death today, but just enough that you take some of what I and Pete have said, and you are able to turn it into something beautiful and valuable. And so with that idea in mind, I want to start off by just, pointing out we are all good IT people. So we're going to start by building a data dictionary and defining our terms. What is visibility? What makes something visible or invisible, for that matter, in a monitoring context? The reason I ask is because people will often come up to me at conventions or in customer engagements, and they'll say, oh yeah, we need to make sure everything is visible. And I'll ask, like, what are you looking for in terms of visibility in a monitoring solution? And they falter a little bit. And so what happens is people often oversimplify visibility to maps or possibly dashboards with maps on them. And visibility is much more than that, and it's more important than people give it credit for. And sometimes they'll stop and they'll say, well, I'm monitoring. Isn't that enough? So if we jump to the next slide, this is a perfect picture of what visibility is. Visibility is the idea that objects automatically request attention when they need something, and they show their current state, including the ability for you to quickly drill down to what's actually wrong if something is in fact wrong. And they give you the ability to view history to understand the current state relative to its previous state, and also understand each object in relationship to other objects. And finally, you see when those relationships change. That is what I would consider a working definition of what visibility is in a monitoring context. Now, the fact is that a lot of what I described sounds like a map. And if we go to the next slide, it may even remind you of a very particular map that existed in a mythical school for witchcraft and wizardry. And the fact is, visibility may still sometimes look like that or have a map-like quality to it, but the experience, both front end and back end, is different as the one that you would get from an old gas station that you can open once and can never fold back the same way twice, and that particular piece of parchment with which you would manage mischief. Now, before you really laugh and throw the idea away, I want you to think about it. Monitored objects, in this case the students, could be seen wandering around the hallways and classrooms, but the data that was driving that map would look pretty familiar to those of us who do a lot of monitoring. It would look like this. It makes you wonder if the wands came with GPS radios attached to them or something. Anyway, the point is that this is perfectly normal monitoring data that we're looking at here. It's in the system, but that doesn't make it visible just because it's there. It took the front end process of the map to make this data into usable information, and so you could make sense of it. But I want to be clear that just because something is on a map doesn't make it functionally visible either. So why not? Well, Maps have obsolescence built into it. It's like a car. Actually, it's worse than a car. A car, you drive off the lot and it immediately loses value. A map, you're halfway finished and it's already lost almost all of its value because the whole thing has changed since you started. Now, of course, there are automated maps and they're a start, but they still don't really solve the issue. Now, I would like to remind you that the Marauders map wasn't perfect either. You know, you couldn't see when certain students were in certain areas, like the room of requirement. I realize I'm pulling on a lot of the Harry Potter mythology, but you know, you couldn't see students in every single space, and secret passageways had cave-ins that weren't displayed on the map, so they required some tribal knowledge. And here in the real world, you still need to tweak your automated maps too. More than that, however, is this interesting twist that the thing that makes automated maps convenient also tends to break their specificity and their usefulness. For example, let's say you scan a subnet or a segment of your network and you let the map auto-generate, and then you lay things out and you group them into human logical, not network logical ways, and then you throw a background in place and it looks really good, and 2 days later, it rescans the network and finds 6 more devices and throws them just about anywhere onto that map, and it borks the whole thing. So that is a problem with the automation, is that the automation that makes it easy to collect doesn't make it easy to maintain necessarily. And another problem with automated maps is scale. As a monitoring engineer, if I get a request for a map, the first thing that I'm going to say is, well, what do you want on it? And a lot of folks, especially folks who've never dealt with mapping and automated mapping before, will say, oh, just put everything on it, and then we'll cut out what we don't want. And that's where you see the next slide. Let me just be here to tell you right now that you never, ever, ever want everything on a map. You just don't. Zoom in, zoom where? Like on what? What part of this is actually interesting at any given moment? And how would you be able to suss that out? Maps are useful when they are particular and contextual. But being particular and contextual means that things get left off. And things being left off is the opposite of what visibility is. So maybe we'll put a bunch of maps on a bunch of different screens and we'll just hook them all up and we'll put them up on put them up in a display, right? And that's where the next slide comes in, which leads to what my fellow head geek, Patrick Hubbard, calls swivel chair integration, where you sit with 27 monitors in front of you and you just swing your head from side to side trying to take it all in. Because I got to tell you, single pane of glass is a crap phrase. I mean, like, it's garbage. And really, it's not much more than a cute idea. It's not really executable. You can't really do it. It also implies that you can get, either by hiring or growing enough eyeballs, to stare at enough screens waiting for some blinky to turn red. And that's simply not efficient or effective. So I want to go back to what is visibility. What do maps and visibility really talk about? And on the next slide, you see something. We've seen these before, right? These cave drawings. And what they've discovered is that there's a lot of information here. It's not just a pretty picture on a wall of what I poked my spear in on my summer vacation. This picture transmits information about hunting technique, safety, migration patterns, and a lot more. They realize there's a lot of information embedded into these cave drawings. Now, Simon Wardley, who is one of the preeminent voices in visualization as it relates to IT and business, says that there are 2 elements that are fundamental for something to be considered a map, which is position and movement. So some visualizations, such as business process diagrams, show relationships, but not really movement. Maps like that wizardly wireless heat map, the Marauders map, show movement, but not necessarily relationships, and visibility needs both. So before we go any further, I want to take a minute and just make sure I'm clear about what monitoring is versus a map or anything else. So on the next slide, you'll see monitoring is, that's all that's here. Monitoring is not a screen or an alert or a blinky or a buzzy or a whoop-de-whoop noise or an email or a report. Monitoring is nothing more and nothing less than the continuous collection of metrics and data from a set of target devices. That's it. All the other stuff I mentioned is the happy byproduct of doing the monitoring part first. So I just had to put that aside, just to be clear. You got to do the monitoring part before you can do any of the other visibility stuff. So how do you get from monitoring to visibility? One of the key elements is context. Can you see what and how a thing, an object is doing? Can you see when it's not okay? Is there a sense of motion? Is there an appropriate sense of motion? So here are a few examples and why they may or may not have elements of visibility. Here we've got, I can see a selection of objects. Now it's a selection, it's not all of them, okay? And I can see they're in a relationship. I don't really have much in the way of motion. I can't really tell which direction things are moving in, where the data is at any given moment. And I can't see how things were 10 minutes ago. I can see how they are now. Everything's nice and green, but I can't see what was going on before that. Now on the next slide, it's not better, it's just different. Okay, in the context of their roles, I can see how data should be flowing, but I don't see how it's actually flowing right now, nor can I see how it was flowing before. I don't have any of that. So this doesn't really give me visibility either. On the next slide, I can see objects. I can see lots and lots of items, and I can see how they are right now, but I get no relationship. I get no movement. I get none of those things. Now, okay, fine. On the next one, I see a details page. Okay, and here I can get history. I get status, current status, and I can get some history of what it was like earlier, but I don't get relationship or context. Okay, so let me talk about an example of where I got everything I needed for real visibility. This is a story with a map, and it's not your traditional map, although we'll get there. Okay, so on the next slide, we'll start off here. My buddy Byron Anderson had a client who was complaining about a slow network between two offices. So using a feature called NetPath, he was able to see where the data was getting hung up. And so the slowdown is right there in the middle. You can see it's about 128 milliseconds. I know it's a little bit of an eye exam on this slide right now. And so he wondered, like, why is it that slow? So then he figured out where those two node points were. And one was in Kedo Bay, New Zealand. The other one was Leander, Texas. And just to emphasize the point of the distance, there's almost 6,000 miles between those 2 points. And you'll see that on the next slide where we get to a real map. And that tells me that the problem, the limitation, the slowdown was due to speed of light, nothing else. But it was the map that showed both the relationship and the movement and the status that allowed us to ask the right questions to dig into all of that. That, in a nutshell, gives us an idea of what visibility is all about. So on the next slide, I'm going to wrap up what I said into a nice, pretty little bow. This is also what I call the mostly unnecessary summary. How you visualize information is a large factor in shaping the actions that you're able to take about that information. And that's really where our efforts in making things visible go. So with that, all that highfalutin, high-level stuff, you're probably saying, yeah, but what do I really do with that? How do I really make that happen? And that's where Pete comes in. Pete is able to take all of my waffling theory and turn it into actually actionable results.
Thank you, Leon. That was awesome. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to ground this presentation now with a few slides that talk about a set of products focused on the systems, infrastructure, and application side of things. First product I'm going to talk about is called SolarWinds Server and Application Monitor. If anyone is familiar with it, people refer to it as SAM. It's a lot easier. When you think about everything we just talked about in the context of visibility, Leon makes a great point. Monitoring is a starting point. It's the collection of data. It's then after you get that data, not just presenting it, but how do you present it, and what can it tell you, and how can you take action. But before you do that, let's talk about getting things in and starting to monitor. Well, the first thing is we have a single platform. Okay, and Leon makes a great point. It's not about a single pane of glass, although that's doable, but depending on your environment, unless you've got very few, if you've got one server and an application, maybe one database, yeah, maybe you can do a single pane of glass. But the reality is
you either need a small number of things or a really big pane of glass. One of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know they have some of those really big ones at airports and out in Las Vegas, but yeah, but it's having a single approach, having a platform that leverages a common set of services. So depending on what your role is within your IT organization, you could be sharing a common or a single source of the truth, and that this approach will work for you whether you're in a on-premise traditional data center where you've got investment in your IT gear, or you're in the cloud or multiple clouds or some combination of all the above. Um, the other thing is to get to that point where you've got visibility into the health and performance, you got to get up and running. So you want to make that as easy as possible. And if you have to do a whole lot of customization to get going, then it's going to take you that much longer to not only get to that visibility you're looking for, but to maintain that. So SAM has over 1,200 out-of-the-box templates for applications, databases, infrastructure, devices. So again, one of the things there is just helping you quickly get going. And yeah, if you do have some very unique environments, being able to do some level of customizations there as well. I think this next thing is important when you talk about this idea of a single pane of glass or an approach, is being able to set up an environment depending on what you're responsible for, being able to provide a layer based on what your responsibilities are. And then to the extent you can have automation that can do things, as Leon talked about, it's not just about motion, position, understanding relationships and dependencies. Unless you only have one server and one database, and maybe an application or two, you don't have to worry. You know that the relationship is, and you know what the dependencies are. But when you have multiple applications and databases, and you've got a variety of infrastructure, especially if it's in multiple places, being able to understand how they impact each other is critical. And we provide that. And again, auto instrumenting that environment is very important. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And then when you start trying to figure out, okay, how am I doing? You got to start with a baseline. So being able to use a product like SAM to baseline your performance and the health of your environment, and whether that's a visual or being able to get alerted. So you set thresholds. I'm approaching a threshold. I've reached the threshold. I've exceeded a threshold. But being able to have a baseline of what's normal, so then you've got an idea when something's not normal. And when we talk about visibility, especially if you have an on-prem environment, you have an investment in hardware, it's extending that visibility into the actual hardware and its health. Are the fans on a critical physical server functioning? Is the CPU having issues? Being able to also understand the physical health of a server in addition to all the software and the virtualized environment. And then I'll take it one more step. Whether you've got a server you've purchased and it has a warranty, when does that warranty expire? Or you've leased it, when does the lease come up? Those things are important, because not having visibility into that can be an issue when all of a sudden things go wrong and you don't have insights into what's going on, and you might have just lost a server or about to lose a server and you haven't planned to replace it. So when we look at what SAM's trying to bring to the table, it really is holistic, from the physical soft hardware to the virtual environment, all the way up the stack. You can go ahead to the next slide. So you take this foundation and then you add to it, Leon talked about monitoring metrics. Well, many of you have probably heard the word observability. It's been used a lot in the DevOps world, although it applies to IT in general. And that having observability is kind of like that visibility. It's not monitoring. It's, I need to understand the state of my IT environment. And by adding logs to the metrics that you're collecting gives you an enhanced view and a different perspective of health and performance. So being able to have logs, again, this product log analyzer, again, part of this Orion platform. I didn't mention Orion earlier, but it's the same platform that SAM is built on, tightly integrates now metrics and logs, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But having visibility into logs, whether it's errors, whether it's just trying to validate certain performance or potential latencies, and correlating the log data with that metrics that you get from SAM provides basically an enhancement to the insights you get with regards to the state of your IT. Go to the next slide. Now, SAM provides monitoring for your virtual servers, hosts, but we have a product called vMan, again, integrated into this common platform that I just mentioned, and it takes you to a whole nother level to where you get details around your clusters, your virtual machines, application groups, hosts, your virtual storage, giving you even further depths and insights into how your virtual environment's performing. And I'm guessing that most everyone here has and is implementing a virtual environment. If you're a mid-sized company or a larger company, taking advantage of the benefits of a virtual environment. So now you add this additional capability, and I'll show you some of this in a moment when I do the demonstration. And then the other thing is being able to understand, based on your virtual environment, the benefits of a virtual environment are also the challenges of a virtual environment. If you can't control it, if you're not aware of how it is performing, it can get out of control and actually cause you problems. And all the benefits of trying to optimize your physical resources by putting in a virtual environment go down the drain if you cannot control and understand how well you've implemented it. And then just one more slide. This, again, this is either important if you're a large company, or it's important regardless of the size of your company. It's really important for you to have a lockdown environment, meaning you have servers that have a specific set, an image, if you will, a configuration, and that you don't want that to change. Number one, because you've tuned these individual servers a certain way. So being able to know the minute one of your lockdown configurations has changed, being aware that, hey, something's changed, why is it changed, and being able to see exactly what those changes are. And later on, I'll show you where you can correlate how a change in a configuration might relate to certain performance or availability of your environment going down the road. But also having the capability to say, hey, again, and I didn't talk about discovery when I originally talked about SAM and virtualization manager, but being able to auto discover environments. Well, for server configuration monitoring, or SCM, also the capability to detect servers or applications that might have been added that don't have monitoring on them, and they need to be, but you've got that option to be made aware. So again, when you talk about, it's not just about collecting data, it's to take action, if you will. So if you go to the left, and kind of written I want to cover in this demonstration. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and honestly, I don't think it's much of a limb, but I don't care what size company, I don't care if you're a startup, you're a mid-sized company, you're part of a large organization. I'm pretty sure you're not all sitting around saying, man, they've over-resourced my group. I've got more time than I know what to do with because I don't have that much work to do. I can't imagine that's happening. And if it is, please send me an up. it's with as
Excuse me, Pete, we're having some audio issues on
the
your end. You're cutting out quite a bit.
let me try something here. Hey, is this any better?
Big difference. Big
Hello?
difference. Yes, I can hear you now. It's a big difference.
Okay, my apologies, everyone. The point I was trying to make, and I know it's not rocket science, but it's not just that the demands on an IT professional are higher, but the stakes are higher because the business is so much more dependent on IT for the success of the business. And you've got less time to learn new things, to bring it all together, and really to take control of the landscape. So again, today we're talking about visibility, but it's hard not to talk about how that does set you up for when things go wrong and how you can take advantage of this same information when you do have insights into the state of your environment to be able to make changes, to optimize, to plan for change. So I'm going to kind of take you through 4 areas in my demonstration here. I will tell you just out of the gate that what I'm going to show you is a flyby. It is a quick 10-minute. Here's some concept of the things you can do from the perspective of visibility with this SolarWinds systems management solution, but it doesn't nearly, just maybe tip the iceberg of the capabilities. Now I'm also, and you can, Rich, you can share my, give me presentation rights, and then I can move over. But what I wanted to tell you was that, hold on here a second. Okay, good. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Look perfect. Looks great. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm glad this timed out. I use our demo system, and this is an interactive demo system that any one of you can use and go even deeper into what I'm about to show. And if you just go to the SolarWinds.com, go to any one of the products like SAM, and it says interactive demo. Yes, we ask you for your firstborn, but after that, it's good to go. We don't ask you for firstborn. We ask you for your name and email address. But what I wanted to start with is, first of all, this is kind of a summary. And again, everything I'm showing you here, you can actually go into and go even deeper. But Orion is the common platform that SolarWinds has common alerting. The maps you're going to see, a lot of the charting. There's some function I'm going to show you. But we're going to focus on systems. So there's a whole bunch of industry-leading modules on the network side and web and detailed storage and voice. We're going to focus on the systems side. But to Leon's point earlier, here's an example of a summary. This is just our demo system of all the applications. And even this is a lot of information, right? But I do get some sense, and I can set this up a variety of ways. You see here, you've got a list of applications. I've got some maps I can click into. But what I wanted to show you is, well, I'm the person responsible for our Exchange environment. Well, I can set up an environment where now my visualization is specific to the things I care about. And as you can see here, and I'll talk about, the drill downs and more of the capabilities, but I wanted to give you a sense of all these different ways you can look at it. Here's an example of a setup of a hybrid SharePoint. So you've got on-premise as well as cloud elements making up this SharePoint environment. If that's what I'm responsible for, this is a way for me to kind of take a look at it from that perspective. Let's take a totally different look at it from a regional perspective. I might be responsible for the different regions. I might just be responsible for one of the regions, and I'm going to dig in at a specific location. In New York, I could look at a location in Los Angeles. So again, these are all different ways, depending on what your role is. When I talked earlier about having these multiple layers, and it really helps you define what is it that you need so you can have that visibility, so you can understand what's going on. You can understand what the dependencies are. You can understand how things are flowing, and if necessary, you can take action. Here's just one more cut of things. This is just, I'm responsible for all the virtual hosts in my environment. This just kind of shows VMware or Hyper-V and Nutanix. It shows that we support multiple virtual environments, but the point is from here, there's all sorts of information that I have right here specific to my virtual environment, and I'll get into some of the details on this. But right now, I'm just trying to give you an idea. Here is an example. I was going to the next step. I'm looking at all my Windows applications. Now I want to look at hardware. So at this point, I'm going to look at these three. I've got these 3 units. I think I've opened it up here, but I'm just drilling into it here to give you an idea. I'm going to pick this, and I'm going to drill into the hardware. Okay. So now I'm drilling all the way down in, and I've got information here about what type of hardware it is, how are my fans, power supplies, okay? And I'll get more into all these. I know there's a lot of red, yellow, and green. The point is, when it comes to getting quickly knowing what's going on with what you care about, and not just, so you're not just collecting data now, but we're giving you a variety of ways to visualize. And of course, and this will have it here, you'll see what events might have already been triggered for this specific environment. All that stuff is there. So obviously proactive alerting is a big part of this solution. But what I'm showing you here is a combination of both the SAM product, the virtualization product, the server configuration, and the log analyzer. Okay, I wanted to show you 2 more things. So I showed you this on the virtual environment. Then there's a bunch of reporting. I'm not going to get into it, but we've got tons of reporting, and you can report a variety of ways. Here's a way to just get a warranty status and understand, when a lot of these physical assets are coming off warranty, which most of these, if you look at the dates, have expired years ago. But the point is, when you talk about getting visibility into the environment, that's what we're talking about there. So now let's go and take another step. So now, again, I'm looking here at my SQL environment. So again, I'm just responsible for SQL. But here now, I want to go as the person responsible for all the SQL servers, whether in virtual or physical. I'm going to click in to one of our physical servers supporting this SQL Server environment. So what you see here, again, it's a map, but it gives you some concept of the dependency. So this physical node here, you see it's NOC SQL01. This is a physical server, and it's showing you the virtual servers it's supporting, and it also shows some of the network. And you see here we've got some issues in a couple areas. And by the way, every bit of everything you're seeing, you can drill deeper and deeper. And as I click, because I clicked on this, it's showing me all the elements here to the right. So it's giving me a sense of all the things that this physical server is responsible for, and quite frankly, a level of status. And there's a whole lot of different ways I can represent this. Again, I'm just kind of doing this flyby. Here's an example of a virtual environment. And now I'm looking at things like, well, has it been available? And do I have any issues with the performance? Oops, sorry. So I've got all sorts of data here that can tell me about, the capacity of the virtual server and the different elements that's serving up, whether it be CPU and memory, and giving me an idea of, over time, when will I be out of resource? So lots of information. Again, we could spend hours just going through these types of screens, just trying to give you a sense. Now, here's an example of bringing in the logs. Again, later I'm going to show you how you can put this stuff all side by side with metrics. But here, I can decide quickly, what type of log files do I want to look at? Let's just say I'm interested in this case just traps, and then I want to look at the type of logs I want to look at. In this case, the tags I have here for authentication failure. I'll show you something else. But you can see here very quickly, I can get a sense of what's going on, and then I could always open up our performance analyzer, which I'm going to show you in a moment, that I can put this stuff side by side. Here's an example where I just took part of our virtual environment and I wanted to get some information about our vSphere alarms. Again, very easily, all this tagging, this color coding, this all makes it easier for you not to just get insights into what's there, but you can quickly go and understand how these different things are impacting your environment. All right, I've timed out here on this one, so let me just. All right, here's another example on how you get understand health and performance. You can get compliance information. You know, this is telling me, hey, I've got 59% of the rules passed, the total number of things I'm looking at. In this case, you'll see here, I've got a SQL server that only 37% compliant. So I can drill down into this, and it's going to give me a sense of, okay, not only how many rules passed, where were the issues, and it's going to tell me the details of the rules that did not comply. So these can be a variety of rules that you set up. I'm just trying to show you different ways you can get insights into understanding the health and performance of your environment. Okay, virtualization sprawl, VM sprawl is a big deal. Having the capability to know how many of my VMs are over allocated, under allocated, how many have been shut off for a period of time or have been sitting idle. This all gives you a sense of what's going on, and also gives you a sense of what might be available to help you manage your virtual environment. This kind of data is really important if you really want to maximize the utilization of virtualization in your environment. All right, here I'm going to drill down a little deeper. We start talking about how do I know what's responsible and what could be having an impact upstream or downstream. So here's one example of a virtual machine, and what it's showing you is these applications on the right that are dependent on the virtual machines. Okay, another thing I can do is, you'll see here, this thing's called AppStack. And you'll see here from the groups, let's just say we have one of those groups by like New York. And what are the applications that are associated with that? And what is the database? And the details on the virtual environment down to the volumes or the LUNs, depending on what your environment is. And I can, again, drill down into any one of these, get insights into any one of these. This shows me how the application and all the underlying elements support that application. All right, this going back to our physical server, here's an example where we've got, and we saw that earlier, by the way, but now this is as we're drilling down. Again, I'm looking at this physical server. I've got information about it, how the CPUs, how many CPUs, like here, I can expand on this Power Edge, and then I can get information. But the other thing I can do here is I'm saying, okay, well, it looks like I have this 65% packet loss. So I can drill into this further, and it's going to help me understand of that, where is all the time spent. And although 90% is being spent, there's no real issue here. The issue really here was with this packet loss. So I might as well get with our network folks. So as you can see here, now this one, I'm going to open up this. This is called the performance stack. And by the way, I've bounced around from a bunch of these different views, but the capability and the information available to you is in context of whatever you're looking at. Okay, so here I went and I'm just going to take this node, this virtual host, and it's showing me here the average CPU. Well, what if I want to look at, for example, the Windows events? So I'm going to drag that over here, and this is showing me from that log analyzer the Windows events and it calls out what types of events they were that were happening along with that. And then I could add some information specific. Let me go here to response time for this lab center, and let's just talk about average response time, drop that in. Okay, so now you can see here, I can do this all day long. I can take information from any of these elements and then drill down even further and look at other statistics and drag it over. So now I've got this capability to take logs, metrics, virtualization metrics, performance, capacity, application, and I could put them all side by side, can help me understand what the correlation might be between maybe, oh, and what if I made some changes, right? So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the configuration changes because, hey, I know I made some changes, and then say, okay, here's where we, now again, this is a demo system, so don't get hung up on the data, but you can see here how we've represented this. Anyway, very powerful capability for you to get insights and visibility so you can take action if necessary, or have a level of confidence that your systems are running as you expect them to. All right, I know we're running late. I'm going to just be another minute or so, and I'll shut down. I think Rich, you said it's okay for me to go over a minute or two.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Now this is our app stack environment. This is like looking at everything. Now there's a couple things I can do. I can show names. So again, we've got these groupings, and like I'm just going to click on our Microsoft IIS application here. What happens is the only things that aren't really phased out are the ones that are specific to that IIS. Now this is kind of hard to read, so I'm going to click on this little spotlight, and what it does is everything else goes away, and again, it shows me, okay, for IIS, there's also, it's related to these other applications. It's related to this server, these hosts, down to these volumes. Now, if I was just looking at that IIS server, okay, I'm gonna click on it like I have earlier in some of those other examples. What it'll do is it's gonna still show me the kinds of things we talked about, and you're gonna have that little app stack just for that application. So however, broad here, I'm just gonna bring this up real quick, and you'll see, looking at this application, it's gonna roll in. And one of the things we also wanted to talk about as I finish here is being able to look at how things change over time. As you can see here, there's multiple things I can look at here that over time I can zoom in. I can change how much time is spent. Matter of fact, let me go here real quick. This is another example of showing change. This is an example of the server configuration manager showing you where we've had changes to configurations. There's some new servers that popped up that might be candidates. And if they have changes, what were those changes? Again, here's an example of a report. So one last thing I wanted to show you is, in addition to all of this information that's provided, you've got the capability to say, hey, I want to look at this over 24 hours, over a longer period of time. So let's switch back to the system, the slides. And first of all, I want to apologize for going over a few minutes. And also, this was a fire hose of a small part of what you can do with this combined set of systems based on this common platform. All right, let me see here. Leon, you there? I'm not Leon, sorry, Rich, are you there?
I am, yes. Do you want to go back to the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
And while we're switching back, I want to emphasize that if you go to demo.solarwinds.com, everything that Pete was just showing is something that you can kick the tires on also. And once again, we know that this was a lot. Hopefully you feel sufficiently irritated and that you are able to turn some of that irritation back into a beautiful little pearl. But if you have questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us and ask more questions or connect or start a conversation.
Yeah, I can't stress enough that you can go in, play on your own, get one of our engineers to kind of take you through specific scenario that you care about. I will summarize by saying, Leon made a strong point about, just having a map or just having a chart or a dashboard does nothing. Just collecting data doesn't mean anything, but it's presenting that information and the information you need to do your job. And that's why it's important in providing these different layers of visibility and then being able to take action. I didn't go into it, but you can drill and drill and drill all the way down, or you can start up at a very high level. And depending on what your role is, any layer can be very valuable to what you need to do your job. The idea of having this common approach with a single platform, common set of services, the learning curve, being able to use the tool the same way, regardless of which modules you've deployed, is very efficient. And then being able to have an environment that will grow as you grow, and whether, again, you're on-prem, if you're a Windows environment, you're a Linux environment, you're now moving to Azure, AWS in the cloud, having this single platform that can help you live in that environment, whether you're already there, whether you're migrating there, and this idea of one single source of the truth. And I won't go into the benefits, you can read them for yourself on the right, but they are pretty obvious. Other than that, I think we're done. And again, I guess we're off by about 8 minutes, so I hope it was worth your time.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for your time today, and we've definitely run out of time. So if you do have questions, by all means, give us a call here at 844-Flycast. That's 844-359-2278, or you can chat with us on our website, as I stated earlier, from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. We have IT experts standing by just for you, just to answer your questions and provide you with data sheets, white papers, or demos, or any information that you may be looking for, or email us at info@flycastpartners.com. A few of you have asked for a copy of today's presentation. Give me a couple of business days, folks, and I will get this edited out. And if you do want a copy of this presentation, email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. I'll make sure that's emailed to you. There's several of you now that have asked. So we'll make sure you get that, and I'll have someone reach out to you on that. With that being said, I do want to take a moment and thank Pete and Leon. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for presenting for us. I learned a great deal myself, and I'm sure our audience has as well.
It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I know I messed up, didn't give you guys a chance to ask questions. So please reach out to Rich, and we'll get all your questions answered.
So with that being said, we have a lot of thank yous from the audience, Pete and Leon. The thank yous are coming in. They enjoyed your presentation as well. They wanted you to know that. So with that being said, folks, until our next broadcast, I want everyone, please stay safe out there, and we'll see you on our next webcast.